Hi, I'm Euge Valovirta, and on this one I'm gonna check out MXR TEN BAND EQ, Bass EQ-200, and how they compare to the old classic industry standard Bass GE-7. Okay, that was some noodling just to show you how big of a difference can, just an EQ in front of an amp make. So what I'm having here is my Tokai Les Paul EMG 8185 pickups. And then the signal goes to my pedal board, which I'm not using now. Well, a bit later I will use the SD1 just to show you a few things. Then it goes to KHE amp switcher. Then I have two amps on. The bad boy 800 212.3 from 1984, and the signal goes straight into that, and then GE-7 800 212.3 Zach Wild signature, and these pedals are in front of that. I'm doing the switching with the KHE amp switcher, and the signal goes to Sandrock React IR, where I have my signature IR Valovirtuals from Jens Bogren's Lead and Clean Pack. Then it goes to this Steinberg audio interface, and I'm recording the guitar to Cubase. So these are quite new. This is, old war horse, so to say. And many people, I think, overlook EQ pedals a bit, because they can really shape the sound. Because as you probably know, an amplifier, it has, well, you can see what, your basic controls, bass, middle, treble, and those are basically volume controls for certain frequencies which the amp designer has designed them to be. If you turn bass, you're actually, turning the volume up on that certain frequency, and then usually they go like bass affects a little bit mids affect bass and treble. They are kind of like they affect to each other. Like with plexi, no matter where they are, it sounds good. It sounds plexi. Some other amps, modern amps, are a little bit more precise, but with EQ you can really shape the sound. And I think that many people, when they are not maybe happy for their amp, or they want to have some other sound, too often they go to buy a new amp, which can be a bit expensive. But what I've done always during my 20 plus years as a professional musician, I always have an EQ with me. Whenever I've gone to a session, I've done like a lot of sessions, I usually go there with my guitar and two pedals, Bass SD1 and this GE-7. I don't bring my own amps and stuff. I sound like myself no matter what. But if I feel that, the amp could be a little bit this or a little bit that. I mean, I've never been a big fan of mesa boogies, but I can, understand why many people like them. They're big and powerful, a bit too nice for my taste. A couple of times when I've gone to a studio, there's been a boogie, and I'm like, damn, I feel this would be more of a kind of like my 800s. EQ in front, and then I'm just boost certain frequencies, and voila. So that's one thing you can really do with an EQ. And let me show you just a few simple explanations. Now these all are in front of the amp. You can put them in an effect loop too. We'll go that next. What that does. So first, the 800, it's your standard 800. It's like the reissue 203X. It just has Jack White's graphics, Black Label, and 6550 power tubes. Other than that, it's a stock 203X reissue 800. So I have that on now. Nothing in front. Everything's bypassed. Okay, how it compares to the bad boy. Probably those who followed my channel, watch my videos, you know that these two are exceptional, especially the bad boy. So it just sounds awesome, and this sounds like your standard 800. Well, what I can do is I can make this sound pretty close. And I have here, I tweaked before I shot the video, this MXR to do exactly that. So I boosted 125 Hz, 250 Hz, 500 Hz, a little bit 1K, a little bit more 2K, and then 4K and 8K. Everything a little bit added 60K, and the gain, this is like, it isn't like distortion, it's just the input like volume, and this is the output, that's 0. So listen what happens when I engage the EQ. So I mean, they're pretty close. With a bit more tweaking, I could probably make them sound like even more closer. So that's one thing you can do with the EQ. And these has, you know, 10 bands. It's plus minus 12 dB. On the website, I think it said 18, but this says 12. So, well, whatever it is, it works. So, yeah. This is actually a bit more punchier now than the bad boy. Bad boy doesn't have anything. So that's one thing you can do. You can really turn your amp into another beast by EQing, you know, just trying out. And then in this case, because the bad boy has a little bit more gain than your usual 800s, it's a stock, but you know. So I boosted the input. So what this does now, it boosts my guitar signal, and when it hits this, so the amp gets my boosted and EQ'd guitar signal, and it behaves differently. Okay, well, that's one thing. And then another thing is, you kind of use it like a overdrive, the tube screamer type overdrive. As you probably know, SD1 tube screamer types overdrives, they cut a little bit lows, boost the mids, and then there's the level and drive or gain knobs. The level, you increase the output level of the pedal, and with the gain you can, or drive, you can add a clipping diode, you know, like clipping overdrive. And then when that signal hits the amp behaves differently. So the whole idea of the overdrive, tube screamer type overdrives, is that the amp gets a really mid-boosted signal, and it makes it behave differently. So this amp, now nothing on, then I will add SD1, where I have the levels around 4 o'clock, drive around 8 o'clock, and treble around 1 o'clock. Listen what happens. You hear what happened. A little bit more sustain, overdrive, compression, lows became tighter. Okay, SD off, then GE-7. What I've done, I've cut it a little bit lows, boosted highs and added level so the amp gets really hot signal. The behavior, the feel is a little bit different because there is no clipping diode like on the overdrive pedal. This just boosts and shapes the signal. But the end result is also really good. So, shape the sound in general of the amp, boost the amp like an overdrive, and then I have here the EQ-200. Here I made like completely different amp out of this. So I've scooped the mids, added a little bit of 120 hertz, a little bit lows, and a tiny bit of, no, there's no highs, just a little bit levels. But basically I've scooped the mids to make it more American sounding amplifier, Fender Mesa Boogie. So first this without anything. As you hear, it's like really like this, and then when I boost it with SD, listen what happens. So I can make the amp a bit towards American style. And these are your really basic EQs. This has a 7 bands and the level. This has 10 bands and the input level labeled as gain and the output level. These are quite the same. This is obviously because it has more bands you can tweak, it's a bit more surgical. This is like, well, on another planet, theater-wise. You can do so many things with this. There's MIDI in, MIDI out, it's programmable. Now I have it on like manual mode, so whenever I do something it shows here, but you can store lots of presets, EQ presets here. So basically, with one amplifier you could have many different sounds. Let's say a clean channel and chorus on. Not a clean channel, but the low input. This is a one channel amp. this really shimmery sound, and then you could store this as, let's say, your clean sound EQ, and then have a totally different EQ for rhythm, for leads or whatever. So basically, one channel amp with an EQ like this, you can make it to multi-channel amp, which is pretty cool. And there's 2 ins, 2 out, so you can run this on stereo, and you can also use this kind of like, you can use these inputs like plug 1 in and then 1 out, like put an overdrive in there, kind of in this pedals loop. And then when if the overdrive is on, then whenever you hit this on, obviously the overdrive will be there too. So let's say you have an overdrive that, you know, you wish that, man, this SD1 cuts too much lows. Well, you could have it in this loop and maybe boost the lows a bit to your own liking. And these are hopefully manufacturers of boost pedals won't mind, but the reason why I really don't have any like boost pedals per se, because they are basically like EQ pedals which are set to a certain value. I'm not gonna name any names, but with this EQ, with these, I can make this to behave like any boost pedals there. Well, maybe not any, but you get the point. So boost pedals are, some of them are like really transparent, so they just boost the level. You can make this transparent boost by doing this. Everything on 0 and then now it's transparent boost. If you want to have mid boost, now it's a mid boost. If you wanted to have a scooped boost with lots of lows and highs, now it's that. So I've had this pedal over 20 years because I can make this to sound like basically, at least in my opinion, any boost out there. Oh, hey, okay, so that was that. And links in the description of these pedals. There's a Rabea Massaad has done a great video for Boss about these pedals, what it can do, how you can program and stuff, because there's so many things you can do, so I'm not gonna even go there, but it's it's programmable EQ, very versatile. And it's a Boss, it's a guarantee of quality. Okay, next I'm gonna hook this to the effect loop, let's see how they behave and sound there. Okay, so now the Boss EQ-200 and the MXR are in the loop, and this one is in front. So this one is actually exactly the same settings as they were when it was in front. So let's listen what happens now when it's in the loop with the same settings. That's actually like a plexi, because now it's in the loop. So as you probably know, effect loop is post preamp, after amplifiers preamp, but before the power amp. So this way, this boost is the power tubes, like, so that they're begging for mercy, kind of like what plexi does, because it doesn't have a master volume. So let's compare to plexi, which warming up a bit. Okay, then this one with the EQ on. Now the amp amp is kind of sagging because it's so hot. So you can make an 800 at least behave a bit like Plexi by this way. Okay, cool. And then now this is in front. So I've done basically quite similar settings. So mid scoop. Okay, what happens when the mid scoop is in front of the amp? It doesn't sound very good because now the amplifier gets like the signal that there's basically no mids, so it doesn't really work, at least in my opinion. But what if we cut the mids when the amp is post preamp and before power amp, so in the effect loop? So suddenly British 800 turns into huge low-end American style, mesa boogie style. And then when I boost this with, let's cut the highs a bit. When I boost this with SD1, so two totally different sounds with an EQ. So, conclusion. EQ is a very powerful tone shaping, sound shaping tool. And it works in front of the amp a certain way and in the effect loop of the amp a bit different way. Both are very usable. What do I think about these? Well, I mean, these are, your, bread and butter, basic equalizers, no programmable stuff. This has two outputs, so you can actually run this into two amplifiers. This is your really basic. I've had this over 20 years, works like a charm. This is, if you really want to have, like, let's say you play in a cover band, you need to have wide variety of different soundscapes, but you don't want to carry a rack full of whatever different amps and preamps and whatnot. You have your classic one amp that you just like, then you can really shape the sound with an EQ pedal, turn the amp into a completely different beast. When you're boosting an amp, overdrive is good, SD1 it's my favorite, but you shouldn't underestimate the power of EQ. That's actually probably the most powerful guitar effect there is, in my opinion. Hey, thanks for watching. Hopefully you get some ideas, some information, create your own sounds, your own rig and whatnot. Because you don't always have to buy a new amp, you can just buy a cheap EQ pedal. Thanks for watching, until next time, take care, bye.